What is the nature of this video? Is this video real? And if it is real, is it good or bad? Philosophers have been asking these types of questions for at least 2,500 years, when the term philosophy, love of wisdom, was invented back in ancient Greece 500 BC. At that time, society had largely been relying on religions and traditions to answer every enigma in the world. Philosophers were the first to acknowledge their ignorance and to seek new understandings by studying the nature of reality. Their curiosity led to the academic study of every body of knowledge: math, biology, physics, poetry, political science, and astronomy, all of which tremendously contributed to the growth of humankind. Later on, subjects that had strong empirical elements merged into what we now call science. Philosophy, on the other hand, mainly focused on three questions. What is there? How do we know? And what is its value? Today, many claim that no philosophical progress has occurred since the ancient times. Stephen Hawking even stated that philosophers don't keep up with modern developments in science, particularly physics. With the advent of the scientific method and our ability to approach things in a more empirical way, philosophy became less and less needed. Science has been the main fuel propelling humanity forward with each new discovery. But is there a way to make progress within philosophy, or does progress ultimately move us away from philosophy? What seems to keep holding philosophy back is philosophers' desire to find absolute truths and build arguments upon that idea. But as science shows, we don't know whether there is such a thing as an absolute truth. Even assuming that we exist requires us to assume that time and space objectively exist, which is a point of quite some debate in science. Likewise, our entire universe is made of quanta, such as electrons and photons, that behave probabilistically rather than deterministically. We experience and conceptualize objects, but on a microscopic level, they are mostly comprised of empty space and quantum particles that pop in and out of existence. You might ask, is that an absolute truth? Well, that's the thing. We don't know for sure, but we can still define what is more or less likely, judging by the current knowledge we have. Therefore, it is more accurate to think in probabilities rather than certainties. And when the debate shifts to probabilities, it's much easier to go about things in a more practical way, since our desire for absolute answers ceases to exist when we accept that we will always have a level of uncertainty. And just like philosophers challenged ignorance and overcame dogmatic religious beliefs, which led to astounding progress for humankind, we can do that today by accepting that we cannot be sure. And to do this, it is imperative that we study neuroscience, a branch of science that allows us to understand the motives behind our own thinking. Believing in absolute truths gives us a sense of safety and helps us cope with the fear of the unknown. Ancient societies often believed that God was responsible for lightning, and this explanation helped them cope with their inability to understand this destructive force. This craving for safety is a part of our survival instincts, and since most of our actions emerge subconsciously rather than consciously, we find it very appealing to think in absolutes. The same applies to existential fears and their related questions. Why am I here? Who am I? The urge to find answers to these questions originates from subconscious emotions that are then channeled intellectually. To cope with these fears, many people still create identities around the philosophies they find most appealing, or the ones that cater to their flawed self-image and enable them to feel and appear more secure and intelligent, thanks to how modern-day culture still portrays philosophy. An ironic example of this is how this can result in an urge to show off with citations and vocabulary. But by understanding these insights, we can take distance from our thoughts and emotions so that we no longer identify with them. Because if we are very emotionally attached to our beliefs, we are not able to let them go. And just like advocates of religion refused to renounce their dogmas, we might delude ourselves as well into thinking we are intellectually superior, when we are actually following the same patterns of resistance. Therefore, critical thinking is extremely important. The ability to think for ourselves by using the knowledge available to us in every discipline, including our insights into our own neurological limitations. And since humanity's recent progress mostly comes from science rather than philosophy, it is becoming gradually more difficult for anyone who considers themselves to be intellectual to devote themselves to the latter.